Hello everyone, my name is Nikit Lodhi. I'm the product manager for Infor GRC solution, and in this session I'm going to cover the overview of Infor GRC. I will start with the risk and control challenges, then move on to the brief introduction of GRC, then move on to the features available in GRC and conclude with the product demonstration. Organizations put in a huge amount of time and effort in order to build their reputation. Once you have established your reputation, customers will just buy your products by looking at your reputation. You don't want to jeopardize your image by not having a system in place that is monitoring your business operation on a continuous basis. To give you an example of reputational risk, we have Wells Fargo, which is one of the famous financial institutions, where we saw a lot of fake accounts being created, or there was financial misstatement that was being reported, and eventually they ended up paying 1 billion as penalty for regulatory violations. The impact was such that the entire management had to be replaced up to their CEO. So now they have a new management in place and they are building their reputation from zero. The next factor that I want to talk about is regulation. With the changes in the business policies and the way the business works at this point, with the latest technologies that have been available, even the regulatory bodies have gone through a lot of changes. So there are some new regulations in place, and the existing ones like SOX compliance that was established in 2002 has also undergone a lot of changes. So to give an example of regulatory challenges, we have the agribusiness major Monsanto that ended up paying 80 million as penalty to the SEC for SOX compliance. Or we can talk about GDPR, which is one of the latest regulations that have been introduced, where the penalty is on an average 4% of your annual revenue. So that is also one of the factors that is challenging for the industries, and that is why you need a good GRC solution. And the third factor that I want to talk about is the change in the business model. So with the latest disruptive business models that are in place, there is impact on the regulatory monitoring as well, and also the way the operations in the business function. So to give you an example, Uber had a case where 57 million customer accounts were hacked, and the response to that from Uber was that they tried to silence the hacker by paying him $1 million. I'm not sure how that will go down in the books and if there is a particular category to represent that. When your financial data has been audited and after reviewing several dozen invoices from a one-time vendor, when your auditor finds a multi-million dollar discrepancy in the account, you need to find out whether it's an oversight, a series of small mistakes, or a complex involved fraud. All this comes in the category of financial risk or frauds that are recognized in your financial statements. Along with that, at the ground level, when your users have been assigned conflicting responsibilities, you need to be able to monitor that for segregation of duties. To give you an example, you have a user in your system who can create purchase orders, and the same user also has the privileges to generate the invoice. In your organization, you need to ensure that only the administrators have the sensitive access, like somebody who is an administrator or somebody from the finance team should be able to define the payroll and look at the information of the payroll. Not every user should have that access. So that is what you need to have to monitor access to sensitive data. And then if you have a large organizations where you have different operations running from different locations, when it comes to audit, you need your auditor to travel to different locations, collect the data manually, and then a lot of time goes into process that data. So that adds to the manual audit process and the audit cost. We already looked at how the regulatory compliances are changing, and that is also one of the major challenges or one of the risk and control challenge that organizations generally face. And then you also need to monitor your configurations. So uh, let's say the mode of payment for all your transaction is set to online mode and somebody goes in and changes that to cash, then such kind of configuration changes need to be monitored. So These are some typical risk and control challenges. So let's take a look at the different factors that drive these challenges. One of the factors is lack of staff. So if you have lesser staff, then that impacts the segregation of duty and sensitive access, where you assign more responsibilities to the same people. Then you have the manual processes, where we talked about the manual audit process, and that impacts the manual processing and your audit costs. Human errors are one of the factors that drive the challenge, where, let's say, we take an example of early or late payments that are being made, or a typical example of incorrect GL postings are some examples that drive the different risk and control challenges. Mergers and acquisitions is one of the factors that drive the challenges. So you say that as an organization, you are compliant and you have the regulatory and compliance policies in place. But when you have acquired another entity, you need to ensure that they are also compliant and they also have their regulatory policies in place. So mergers and acquisitions are one of the factors that will impact the risk and control challenges. Then access to data, again, even though if you have sufficient people in your organization, you still need to maintain that only the people who have uh, the role and responsibilities have the sensitive accesses, and you also need to ensure that there is segregation of duties. And if you have outsourced operation or decentralized operations, then you need to look at the frauds that can happen, and you need continuous monitoring for that. And definitely the audit cost will be impacted with the decentralized and outsourced operations. So we talked enough about the problems, so now let's go ahead and take a look at the solution. The Infor GRC solution will enable you to establish your internal controls. By internal control, what I mean is that you can put in a broad-based set of controls in place that will help you effectively and efficiently manage your company's wide-ranging operational activities. The InfoGRC application can provide you reliability of the financial reporting, and also it will provide you with the compliance policies. So basically, it can help you to comply with all your internal company policies and also the policies that are in place by the regulation boards. And basically, these three are nothing but the standard COSO framework that has been outlined, and that is what InfoGRC will help you achieve as well. And internal controls are not just related to the data integrity and the financial reporting, but it extends far beyond, and it can also help you achieve the goal of the company that you have set for yourself. So, looking at this picture, that what exactly does Infor GRC help you answer? It will help you to look at what exactly is being done in your system by answering the basic question of who did what or did do, and it will also help you identify who can do what, basically who has the accesses to the respective application and who can potentially modify these configurations. So what Infor GRC does is it look at your business application, which has the financial systems, it has the purchasing systems, it could have the ERP applications, CRM data, it could have the HRMS data, and it could be any type of application. It could be an Infor application, or it could be a non-Infor application like SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft, or any other third party. And all this data is fed to Infor GRC, and we help you set up different types of control on this data to help you answer these four basic questions. And what are the different controls that we're talking about? So we have controls like the IT risk management control that will help you to ensure that there are no segregation of duties and sensitive access is maintained. We have the data access and security, again related to the data access and to ensure that who can do what is controlled. Then you have the policy monitoring. So basically, all the controls that are built are in line with the policies that you have built for the organization and the regulatory bodies. Then you have the financial controls that will capture the transactions and the master data. So that will address the did do part of the queries. And then you have the operational risk that can be identified with the transaction data monitoring. You have the anti-fraud programs that can be put in place with the controls. You have the audit assurance based on the reports that are generated from Infor GRC, and the regulatory compliance based on the SOX compliance that we provide, and many more compliances that will be added to Infor GRC in the future. And who are the different stakeholders who will benefit from the application? So you have your outsourcing partners, you have the CFO who would be definitely interested in all the financial controls and the operational controls that have been placed, and the anti-fraud programs that will be helpful for the CFO. And then you have the CIO who can be looking at the IT risk management programs and the data access security and the policy monitoring associated with the access to the applications and the configurations in place. You have the risk managers and the auditors who would be interested in all the different uh, reports that have been generated from Infor GRC to certify audit and to look at the different risks that have been identified by the Infor GRC application. And definitely the human resources team that will be benefiting from the different controls that are being placed in Infor GRC. So overall, you have a picture that we can help you achieve the compliance in a better way, and also reduce the cost of compliance with continuous monitoring and effective Infor GRC solution. Now that we have taken a look at how Infor GRC monitors your business application, let's understand what Infor GRC is, and let's look at the definition of Infor GRC. So there are three components that are involved. So the first component is your business data. So you have your complex business data that could be coming from different business application that needs to be monitored, and for that we define a set of business controls. And what we do is we take your complex data and we transform it so that the business controls can monitor that data. And these business controls are based on your company policies, your regulatory compliance policies, or to capture your financial fraud or the operational inefficiencies. And we analyze this data using the business controls and the transform data using our advanced analysis engine. And what we generate for you is the third component, which is the violations which are available for you to act upon, and where you view the details of the violations and you take the corrective steps, which is nothing but the mitigations that need to be performed. And that is the complete cycle that goes on with the help of Infor GRC. So what we do is we provide you with a continuous set of monitoring controls to monitor your continuously changing business data, and we continuously provide you with the set of violations that are available for you to act. And the entire process helps you to automate your audit process and help you reduce the entire cost of compliance. Now let's take a look at the different modules that are available in Infor GRC, and we have divided them into three categories. So the first one is the application security and user access monitoring. In this, basically, it is all about the user, their roles, and based on the roles, what are the accesses the users are getting. So the first one is the authorization insight. So as the name suggests, it is looking at all the authorization that the user is getting via the roles. So this module helps you ensure that there is segregation of duties in your system and no single user is empowered to perform conflicting responsibilities or conflicting actions. And authorization insight will also help you ensure that a sensitive access is provided only to the users that need it. And then you have the access manager module, which is basically a way of compliant user provisioning using Infor GRC. So you can create users or you can modify the access of the users using Infor GRC. And what it'll do is once you provide the relevant accesses that need to be done, it'll go through the analysis engine, it'll identify the potential violations, and then it'll go through a workflow where the respective approvers need to act on those violations, and they can also approve the respective accesses, and only the approved accesses will be automatically committed back to the business application. So that is the access manager module that we have. And then we have the user activity insight that is mostly based on all the audit data that the applications are generating. So basically all the users that log in into the business application, they perform different transactions and they change the values in the system. So all that is audited, and based on that auditing, we have our user activity insight that can help you answer the question like what was the activity that was done by a particular user and when, like on which particular date was that particular activity performed, and what were the changes that were being done. So that is the user activity insight that is available. And then we have the fourth feature that is available, which is called the certification manager module. So certification manager is for a compliant review process that needs to be done. So for all the users that are there in your system for a long period of time, it is possible that certain users have transitioned to a different team and are still retaining accesses to the old systems. And that is what certification manager helps you do. So they will help you identify that, okay, these are the accesses that are no longer relevant to the user and they need to be revoked. And once they are marked for revocation, Infor GRC can automatically revoke those accesses as a part of the certification review process. And then we have the second category, which is monitoring your financial data, which is the transaction and master data monitoring, where we can monitor your master data for any changes. And it'll also monitor your different business processes like the procure to pay, order to cash, and the general ledger related transactions. We can monitor your inventory insight related data, the HR data, and then we also have a OFAC insight, which is basically monitoring all your customers, vendors, and users against a standard SDN list, which is provided by the US government and which is maintained as a part of the OFAC insight. And then we have the configuration insight that is monitoring your system configuration and process configuration settings. So system configurations is nothing but the system settings such as the user password settings and the system configuration settings that are there for the system security. And then you have the process configuration settings that could be something like the payment terms or the currency for the transactions that are present in your system. So the process configuration settings will impact the business process. So the configuration insight will monitor all these configurations that will impact either security of of the system or the business process transactions. All right, now let's take a look at some of the highlights of the Infor GRC features that we have looked at. We can start with the first one, that is the authorization insight. So basically for authorization insight, we ship standard out-of-the-box controls or rules for identifying segregation of duty risk and sensitive access risk in your system. Along with that, we provide you out-of-the-box reports, which will be the summary and detailed report that will show you the violations. And we also have a page in Info GRC where you can see the entire set of violations for all the analysis that run in the system and you can take action on them. So we provide you a mechanism of closed loop remediation process wherein once a particular violation has been identified, you can review all the details of the violation and eventually you can remediate and mitigate the particular violation based on the business policies. So you have two options basically that are available, which provide as the supporting features for mitigating the particular violations. So we have the exclusion capability, which is nothing but, let's say you have administrators in your system and you already know that these administrators have all the accesses in the system, and for these users you can exclude them so that you can avoid some unnecessary violation and some unnecessary actions for some obvious violations in the system. So you can exclude these administrators. And uh, we also have the feature of compensating control. So compensating control is a way where you can provide a document or some supporting documentation to support the business justification of closing a particular violation. So if you have a business justification, you can provide it as a compensating control. And both these features, which is exclusions and compensating control, they have a validity. So they have a start from and a valid to date. So let's say you want to set a particular exclusion only for a particular audit cycle or only for a particular quarter, so you can do that and you can set the expiry date accordingly. And once the expiry date passes, then that particular user or that particular violation again becomes open and it is available for action by the business owners. So these are some standard out of the box rules that we ship. So here are some examples for segregation of duties and some examples for sensitive access type of rules that we ship. One of the important features that we have available in Authorization Insight is the what if framework that we provide, where you can do some simulations. So you can do some simulations to get the impact analysis. So you can find out the impact of adding or removing access or permissions from the existing roles. You can find out the impact of adding and removing access to certain roles to the existing users. And you can also do a simulation of creating a new user with a certain set of role assignments so that you have an optimal set of roles that can be assigned to the new users. This is a typical what if screen where we are doing a simulation of assigning these three roles to the user. On the left hand side, we are assigning the asset manager, buyer, and contract administrator role. And on the right hand side, what you're looking at is a typical set of rules that are violated for these roles. So you can view the details and you can understand what is the impact of assigning these roles to the users. Moving on to the next feature, which is Access Manager. So Access Manager, as we saw that it is a module for user provisioning and deprovisioning. So some of the highlights of this feature are that we provide you with the approval process template. So in this case, what you can do is you can define which are the stages or which are the approval stages that the particular user provision will go through, who will be the set of users who will be mitigating the violations that are identified while you are provisioning a user, and who will be the set of approvers who will be approving the accesses. So in this case, with the Access Manager module, you can really shift the burden of assigning the roles to the functional team. So basically, let's say if somebody's from the finance team, it is better that the finance team business owners decide which are the accesses required for a particular team member from their team. So that is something that the CIO or the admin team can benefit with. And we have a mechanism where you can define dynamic approvers. So based on the roles that are assigned to the user, the approvals will be routed to that approver. So let's say if you are assigning the roles of a finance team or from the HR team, then accordingly, based on the role, you can route the approvals to that team, and accordingly, the workflow can proceed. We also have some additional cool features like out of office. So let's say if a certain approver is out of office, then you can set an alternate approver and still the approval process can proceed further. And then we also have some mechanism for prohibiting self-approvals. So let's say if I am the user who is submitting the provision to assign some roles to myself, the system can ensure that these approvals will not be routed to me if I am one of the approvers, but it will route it to somebody else from that particular stage. So this is a typical user provisioning screen where you can see all the details. So under violating objects, you will see all the violations that are generated from the assignments to the user. So if there are any violations, you can see it in that section. Then you have the approval details where you can see which are the roles that are available for approval. So you can approve and deny the roles in that section. And basically, as an approver, you can take the action. And then in the other details section, you have all the comments that have been entered by the approvers or the users. And then you can also see the approval details. You can track the entire progress of the workflow. So as you can look at this screen, you can see that the particular user provision has completed the first stage and is currently in the second stage where the approvers need to act on it. And eventually it will go in the final stage where it will complete the provision and automatically commit the changes back to the application. In Access Manager, we have a new feature that we are adding for Infor Insights, which was available only for SAP earlier. So this is the emergency access feature, which is a mechanism of assigning some firefighting roles to the user. So let's say there is a business requirement where a particular user who has access to the sensitive roles is not in office, and for some reason somebody else needs to perform his duties. In that case, you can use the emergency access feature and you can assign the sensitive roles to the users for a stipulated period of time. And that time can be configured in Infor GRC. So you can configure that a particular role is assigned to the user for, let's say, 1 hour, 2 hours, a maximum of 8 hours, which is a typical business day. And you can assign those roles, and the user can perform the actions. And We'll maintain the entire audit trail where what are the activities being performed by the user with the sensitive access, and then automatically Infor GRC will revoke the access to the role from Infor GRC, and then automatically the revoke will happen after the stipulated period of time. So this is the emergency access feature that we have. The next feature that I want to talk about is the user activity insight, and in this case, again, we are monitoring the transactions or the activities being performed by the users. Again, these are also the segregation of duties, activities, or the sensitive access type of transactions that are performed. And this insight will basically help you answer who performed a particular activity and when. So for this as well, we have some summary and detailed reports that are available, and these are some typical set of rules that are available. So as you can see that they are similar to what you have for authorization inside. The only difference being is that in this case, the create, maintain, purchase order is not the access, but rather the transaction that was performed by the user, which we are comparing against the transaction of generating a vendor invoice or processing the vendor invoice. The next feature that I want to talk about is the certification manager. So a couple of highlights that you can see is that you can define a review process, and you can notify all the set of reviewers, and you can start a review cycle, and then the reviewers can take respective action of approving and denying the accesses based on the current role and responsibility of that particular user, and all the denied accesses are automatically revoked after the review cycle is completed. So Certification Manager leverages the same infrastructure that we have created for Access Manager, which is basically all the user provisioning workflows are also available for Certification Manager. So we can define the same dynamic reviewers, and we can define the stages and different conditions for each of the stages and how the stages will be bypassed. All of those features that are available for Access Manager are inherited for the Certification Manager workflow as well. Another feature that we have is the configuration insight. So in case of configuration insight, we have bifurcated into two parts. You have the process configuration insight and you have the system configuration insight. And both these are important for monitoring all your sensitive configurations in the system. And we take a baseline of all the configurations at the time of initial configuration when your system is set up, and then later on we monitor them for any changes, and we notify the respective business owners of any changes in such critical configurations. Then we have the process insight, which is a very important module for all the financial monitoring that is needed in your system. And there are different types of business cycles that we monitor. So starting with the first one, which is procure to pay, wherein we monitor your procure to pay cycle for some of the typical P2P cases, such as, let's say, if there are any vendors and employees with the same bank account, or vendors and employee with the same address, we can highlight those kind of collusion between the procurement and the supplier team. And we can also highlight some of the transactional fraud. So let's say if the invoice date is before the purchase order date, that means that the invoice was generated before the actual PO was submitted. So such kind of transactional fraud, or if the invoice issued is missing some purchase order information, then finding out such kind of details, all these kind of transactional fraud can be captured as a part of P2P violations. Then we have the order to cash cycle, where we can monitor your duplicate sales orders that are generated from your system, or if there are any duplicate billing documents, or if the sales order payment terms are different from the customer master payment terms, or if any sales orders have changed after the billing invoice was generated. So all those kind of uh, transactional fraud, or all those kind of transactions can be monitored and can be highlighted with the help of process insights. Then we also monitor your general ledger. So the typical activities of the general ledger, like the reconciliation, can be monitored. And if there are any issues in the entries that have been posted to the journal, so if there are any key fields that are missing, or if there are any journal entries being made on holidays or weekends. So we can highlight those kind of transactions, and that is something that we monitor with the help of Process Insight for general ledger. We also monitor your HR and payroll data for any discrepancies. Then we have the inventory insight module where we monitor your inventory data as well. So let's say if there is any economic order quantity kind of a flag that needs to be maintained for your inventory items, and if it is not maintained, then we can monitor that with our rules. And then we have let's say if there is a reorder point that needs to be set for the inventory and that is not set, that also can be helped and like can be monitored with the help of process insight rules. And then we have another insight which is called the OFAC insight, which is the Office of Foreign Asset Control, which is basically entity maintained by the United States Treasury Department, and they publish a list of entities that should not be dealt with. So any of your customers or vendors or employees that are mentioned on that list, we'll be flagging them out as violations, and you should not be dealing with such blacklisted entities. So as of now, we are looking at the OFAC SDN list, but the product is open for configuration, and we are also looking to integrate with any other such third-party SDN list so that we can provide you with that feature of looking up that particular list. So some of the highlights, we have a wide range of business controls that are available. So we have duplicate type of rules to identify any of the duplicate invoices or the duplicate sales orders. We have the MAT type of rules to typically do some mathematical calculations. So to give you an example of process, the invoice predating the purchase order, for that we need to do some date calculations, and for that we use the MAT type of rules. We also have the baseline type of rule to monitor any changes in the configuration or any changes in the master data or the important key fields in the master data. So we maintain a baseline and we monitor those fields for any changes in the future. Uh, we have the extendability feature that I talked about, where we want to extend the pluggability of any of the SDN list that we have available other than OFAC. So we have the extendability feature as well. So with that, we conclude all the features that I wanted to cover. All right, so now let's start with the product demonstration. So right now I'm logged in into one of our internal tenants, and what we can see is the default home page that is loaded based on my role, and I've logged in as a business process owner. So what we can see on this page is a couple of widgets which are showing some information. So we have the violation count that is showing me the count of the violation based on different priorities. I have the violation summary that is showing me all the users, and it is bifurcating the violation detail based on priority. Again, we have different types of rules. What are the counts? We have a key indicator summary, a list of monitored applications, and which are the reports that I've subscribed. So there are different types of widgets that are available based on the different roles, and that is what you see on the home page when you log in for the first time, which give you an high-level overview of what are the different violations in your system and what is the status of your system currently. So you can go into the system by either drilling down from one of these widgets, or you can navigate from the app menu and you can select Infor GRC, and that will take you to the Infor GRC application. So let's start with the primary component, which is where you define the business controls. So let's go into design and then go into business control and define the condition that is required for building your controls. So the first we need to define all the conditions in the condition library, and generally we ship them to you as a pre-shipped set of conditions that are available with the out-of-the-box rules that we provide. So in this case, I'm just going to use the existing rule or the existing condition and demonstrate the same to you, and then I'll show you how that I'm using that same condition in the rule as well. So I'm creating a conflict type of a rule where I'm trying to find out all the users who have conflicting access, such as create, maintain purchase order and process invoice. So in this case, I'm creating this condition for create maintain purchase order where I have defined the name of the condition. I have defined the insight. I've selected the application for which I want to define this condition. And since it is a permission conflict, I am selecting the object as permission and I've defined all the permissions that are needed to be added here. Let's say I want to modify something, I can just go in there and select one of the conditions and I can add it right here and it'll get added. And now my condition is ready and I'm good. I can just save it and it'll tell me how many rules it will impact and it will just save the condition details. Then I can again navigate back to design and go into rule books and I'll demonstrate one of the rules that I've built using this condition. So let me go into one of the demonstration rule books, the demo rule book that I've created, and in this I've created quite a few rules. So let me show you the create, maintain, purchase order versus process payment. So this is the one that I'm creating, which is a conflict type of a rule, which is a permission conflict, and I've used the conditions. So this is the one where I've used the create, maintain, purchase order, where I have added all the four permissions for create, maintain, purchase order, and the one where it says process payment, it has added the permissions for process payment. So this is the typical SOD type of a rule that can be created in Infor GRC. And then all I need to do is run an analysis in my system. And then once I do that, it will generate the violations which can be viewed on the violations page. So in order to navigate to the violations page, you need to go to monitor and violations. And by default, it will load all the violations that are present in my system. I can filter out specific violations by selecting the filters that are available. And now let's go ahead and take a look at one of the violating objects, which is violating for the same rule that I have created. So let's go into this one. So let's look at the violation details for this user. So once we drill down, what we'll see is this particular page where you can see the violating object and you can see that it is violating the same rule that we selected, which is the create maintain purchase order versus process invoice for the application Cloud Suite Financial. And let's look at the details. And in the reason, by default, it will show you an advanced view. So we can switch the view to by role. So these are the two roles that are assigned to the user because of which the violation is generated. Since it is a permission conflict rule, we can see by permission as well. So here we can see that these are the different permissions which are assigned to the user because of which the violation is generated. You also have some additional details about the violation like the current assignments of the user. So these are the different roles that are assigned. Are there any other rules that this particular user is violating? So you can see that there's another one other rule that he's violating, and you can also look at some other users who are violating the same create maintain purchase order versus process invoice rule. You can perform different actions from this page, which is the remediation action. So you can either mitigate, which is basically you can decide to close the particular violation. So you can exclude this and like let's say if you know that there is a business justification for this particular user to have these rules, so you can exclude it and it will not appear as a violation. You can apply compensating control, which is a business justification that can be associated with this particular mitigation. You can put in some comments. If you're not sure, you can assign this particular violation to another business process owner. You can discuss this particular violation with another business process owner. You can put in some comments and look at this particular violation later. You can download the violations. You can navigate back and forth on the list of all the violations that you see on the landing page. So you can navigate back and forward from this particular using these particular buttons. So now we created the rule, we looked at the violations. So now let's go in and look at the user provisioning part. So let's go ahead and create some users. So we can go into manage and go into provisions, which will take me to the user provisioning page. So you can see that one of the existing user provisioning requests that has been submitted where you can see, okay, this was the user that was created. You can look at the input parameters that for Nikit, this was the particular role that was assigned. And based on this particular assignment, were there any violations? So we can go into the violating object section and you can see that there are some violations that are present. And you can see in the approval section, this is the particular role that is available. But since it is grayed out, that means I am not the approver for this particular assignment and somebody else needs to act on it. So who is that? So I can go into the other details section, and then let's say I click on approval stages. So it will show me that, okay, the IT admin is the person to whom this particular provision is assigned and he needs to act on this user provision, and then it will go into the completion stage. Let's go ahead and submit one user provisioning request and see how it is automatically created in IFS and how IFS will transmit it back to the target application. So let's click on the plus icon and click on user creation, and let's go ahead and create one user. So I'm going to select the data source as data source underscore info. I'll create a user and I'll put in all the details, and I can put in additional comments if I need to, and then I just need to click on add user. In this wizard, you can create 5 users in one go, but for this demonstration, I'm just creating one. I can click on the next button and then it will take me to the page where I can do the role assignment for this user. So let's say I want to assign the roles for Cloud Suite Financial, and I'll select that application. I want to assign the roles to this user as one of the existing users. So I'll do that by clicking on the application, and then I'll select Brenda as my user, and then I want to assign the same set of roles to Tony as well. So I'll select that and then I click on next. I look at the summary that, okay, I've created this user for this application and the role count is 11, and it has automatically picked up a approval process template based on the application instance and the type of the user provisioning request, which is user creation. Then I click on finish and it will create the provision. So generally it will go through an analysis and it will go through a workflow. So I have modified the template so that it skips all that and it directly goes in and commits the changes back to the application. So if I go to history, I'll see that the user is already created. And what I can do now is I can go into user menu and I can go into user management, and let's see if I can find the user here, Tony, and we can see that this user is already created, and you can see all the 11 role assignments that were done for this user. So we saw that how the user was created from GRC and automatically committed back to IFS, and then IFS is responsible for committing these changes back to Cloud Suite Financial. Right, and let's take a look at one of the other features in Infor GRC, which is Certification Manager, which is a periodic review process. So for that, what you need to do is you need to go to Design and Certification Process, and there you need to define the scope of your certification process. So let me show you one of the existing demo processes that I've created. So this one I have created for one of the Infor internal data sources, and I have defined this as a user to role review certification process where user is the primary object and all the role assignments will be reviewed by the reviewers. And then I need to define the process owner. So I am the process owner for this particular process. And then once the process is completed, the sign off owner will need to sign off this process. So once I provide the definition, I need to go back to the certification page, and here I can click on this execute button and it will execute this certification process, and as a result what will be generated is the reviews. So in order to see the reviews, I can go to monitor and go to the reviews page, and it will show me all the reviews that are generated in my system. So let's drill down on one of them and let me show you what exactly is in there. So you have the process name for which this review is generated, and you can see there are different reviewers for this. You can view the secondary object details, which is basically the roles that are assigned to the user. So these are the role assignments. So as a reviewer, what you would need to do is select the roles and approve or deny them based on the current responsibilities and the roles of the of this particular reviewed user. And once you have approved and denied, you need to commit those changes, and that is how you conclude on the certification process. One of the key features that I also want to talk about is the reports that are available in Infor GRC. So let's take a look at them. So in order to generate the reports, you can go to Monitor and Reports page, and there you can see that there's an option to generate the reports. And once the reports are executed, they will be available in your Subscribe Report tab, and you can launch the report. So I have already created one report and I've opened it in document management. So let's switch over and take a look at that. So this is a typical violation remediation details report, and you can see these are the filters that I selected for the report, and you can see that these are the typical mitigations that were performed and different comments that were entered can be seen in the report, and when the particular violation was mitigated and by which user and what are the details. So this is a typical violation remediation report, and this report is generated with the integration with Info Document Management. So with that, I want to conclude my session. Thank you for your time today.